The local economy is recovering here on Oahu, according to a new UHERO report out this morning. And Oahu can thank its strong international tourism rates for bringing positive economic activity to the state. And the tourism industry continues to gain steam with a large jump in visitor spending and arrivals. And joining us here this morning is the executive director of the Economic Research Organization at the University of Hawaii, Dr. Carl Bonham. Mr. Bonham, thanks for joining us here this morning.
Good morning.
All right, so let's talk about the economy and the newest report out right now. The UHERO State Forecast Update was released this morning, and it's titled Hawaii's Two-Speed Recovery. So why do you call it a two-speed recovery?
Well, essentially you've got the visitor industry, and then you've got everything else. And within that tourism industry, you've got significant growth. That's where the jobs are being added. That's where spending is happening. The rest of the economy really isn't doing anything. And you've got the same, really, two speeds, Oahu versus the rest of the state.
And we're always talking about tourism here. And is the recovery really as strong as the latest numbers suggest?
You have to take into account the fact that, last year at this time was really a horrendous time period. Visitor spending was at its lowest level in almost a decade. Say last August we fell below $800 million per month. So the recovery on a year-over-year basis looks really, really strong, and it has been a very surprisingly strong recovery. But we're still, particularly on the neighbor islands, we're still off from our previous peak by 15 to 20%. And if you take into account rising costs, so everything still costs more, if you take into account inflation, real visitor spending is still off about 15% from its previous peak.
And there's a big difference between the number of visitors who visit Oahu and all the neighboring islands. It seems like the neighboring islands aren't doing as well in terms of the recovery.
You see some really big growth rates, for example, on Maui has seen very strong growth rates, but they fell so much farther than Oahu did. So Oahu really has benefited from strength particularly in Japanese visitors.
And let's talk about that. Where are the most visitors coming from?
Well, it's not the most will be from the United States, of course, just in terms of absolute numbers, but most of the growth in spending, for example, is coming from non-Japanese international, so Korean, China, that kind of sector.
And when will the rest of the, I guess, when we talk about this, it says the rest of the economy join the party. What do you mean by that?
Well, as I said, it's the visitor industry is what's growing right now. So we're adding jobs in accommodations, right, in the hotel sector. We're adding them in the food sector, in the retail sector, and transportation. But we're losing jobs in general business services, in state government, to some extent in county government. So the question is, when do we start adding jobs throughout the entire economy? And we think that's beginning to happen, and it's going to speed up in 2011.
Well, we appreciate you keeping an eye on that, and thanks for joining us here this morning.
Thank you.
All right, to see this interview again, you can always head to our KITV website, kitv.com. And coming up next,